Good afternoon and welcome to another Player Podcast. Today's special guest is Vic Marks, who's got a long association with the club, stretching more than 50 years, both as a player, chairman of cricket, board member, and now member of our live stream team, the Dream Team. Nice to see you here, Vic, again.
Well, I've just been hearing, actually, about how brilliant the handbook is. Your assistant editor was telling me how good it was. And then this reminds me, too, that I actually will be one of the few people, assuming there's a dinner in 2025, I'm sure there is one planned. I attended the celebration of 100 years.
The hundreds.
The dinner there. I can't remember much detail, but there was a very long speech by our chairman.
Who was the chairman then?
Herbie Hoskins. Herbie Hoskins. All I remember him saying was, at some point, it went along the lines of, I know you're getting fed up with this speech, but I got one or two more things that I got to say. And he kept going for another 20 minutes.
He was farming stock, wasn't he?
He was from Sparkford, yeah.
Your part of the world.
That's where I was, near where I was born, in South Somerset, yeah.
So how does a boy from Chinook end up getting into Somerset County Cricket Club? How did it all begin, Vic?
Well, I came not that often, but my dad would bring me down. I remember watching Greg Chappell here, and Bill Alley, and Fred Rumsey, and Ken Palmer, and Robbo, in the sort of mid-'60s. And I came along, I went to the 1967
final.
Gillette Cup final, very excited as a 12-year-old. So I was always, following, but not that frequently actually at Taunton. And I loved the game from an early age, for some reason. Played a bit at North Perrott, village cricket where, there's a wonderful ground there, which now has a rather bigger pavilion than when I was playing there. And played at school. And that's probably where I had the biggest opportunity to advance, down at Blundell's eventually.
You were at St Dunstan's, weren't you?
I was at St Dunstan's up at Burnham on
Nice
Sea.
little track they had there, didn't they?
Yeah, and they took their cricket quite seriously.
Yeah. What was he called, the head teacher? Eric somebody?
Eric Stokes.
That's right, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
But they took, they had plenty of fixtures, and they very stern but lovely cricket master who took me to Lord's for the first time. I went to see Boycott and Milburn batting at Lord's in '68 was the first time I ever went to Lord's.
Fantastic.
So it was I was always into cricket. And then got enough. Actually, I was a batsman too. That's how I got signed at Somerset as a batsman.
As a batter.
I bowled the odd over, but essentially at school, along with Jerry Lloyd, I was, a top order batsman. Again, I bowled a little bit of off spin, but that was my primary role. And I was signed as a batsman. I have to keep reminding people of that, and they look back and say, "Surely not," but that was the case. And it was, and I played. One of the reasons I got signed was I ventured in '73. I think I played for England schools. I played for England, sort of whatever it was, the under-19 team against the touring Indians, or was it the West Indians? I can't remember. I remember playing against Wayne Daniel without helmets. I think that was in '73, probably.
He was quick.
And we'd never seen anything like it. I mean, this was a real eye-opener.
Yeah.
Anyway, along we came in '74, where fortunately Roy Kerslake was very much part of the club, chairman of cricket probably then, having captained back in '68. And he'd persuaded the committee that the staff should be enlarged, not at huge expense, but in those days there was probably about 14 players on the staff. But he signed, Pete Roebuck, Phil Slocum, myself, John Hook from Weston, bowled off spin. And rather more significantly, along came at the same time I.T. Botham from Yeovil and Viv Richards from Antigua. So, amazingly, we all turned up as pros, albeit for me, I don't know about the others, 15 quid a week. for that summer, 1974. And
So you were 19?
yeah, well, coming up 19,
Yeah.
18, 19.
Yeah.
And I mean, I remember turning up so excited, so excited. And it may have been a bit drizzly, but desperate to get going.
So where did
And
you
for
live?
the first morning, nothing happened.
No, where were you? Where would you live there?
Well, I've been living with my parents still, which was between Yeovil and Crewco,
So you
Middle Chinook.
So you had to drive in?
Yeah, I think I had a battered old Volkswagen.
Right.
So I got here on time. And then absolutely nothing happened all morning. Was meetings about, this petrol money's not enough, said Merv. And the meal allowance, so can you... So it was all intricate debates about, very important debates about all these expenses and how they would be organised. And then off we went, running around a bit, playing football. If it was dry enough, we had a few nets. And then eventually we got a middle practice. And I just remember standing there. You'd bat for 20 minutes as a pair, perhaps.
Yeah.
And I eventually got to my turn with Pete Roebuck there. And ahead of us was Richards, who I'd never seen him bat before. And then the first ball I remember him facing, in my eyesight, was Bob Clapp, the wonderful Bob Clapp. Great try, running up. Off about 20 yards he ran. Just dragged it about a fraction short, just outside off stump, and Viv just smashed this ball square, square cut, full. And Pete and I looked at one another and thought, crikey, we're not going to get ahead of him. We're not going to get the team ahead of him. So that was, we were lucky. Looking back, so privileged. We saw Richards, and we knew about 3 or 4 months before anyone else that this bloke was going to be astonishing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he was, of course.
Yeah, of course he was. Yeah, and I mean, guess that year you spent most of the time sort of playing second 11 cricket.
Yeah. I didn't play in the first team.
No.
Viv played right from the start, obviously. Yes. Ian didn't maybe play right at the beginning, but was in the team for most of that summer. Yeah. Pete, I think, played 1 or 2 games.
Yeah.
But no, I was in the second team. I was going off to university, like Pete, in October. Yeah. But what a fantastic way to spend that summer.
Yeah, too right.
Closey was there, as the club captain. I'm never quite sure. He knew who Boss was. He knew who Viv was. But for the first couple of months, I think it was pot luck whether he got Slocum, myself, or Roebuck right. But we soon recognised, though, it was, we were lucky too to have the experience of playing some games under Brian Close.
Yeah, I mean, what was he like as a bloke? Because, I mean, there's all sorts of rumours and things what he was like. I mean,
well, there was quite a lot of nonsense talked about the fact towards the end that he's too hard on the younger players. That's certainly I don't remember that at all. If anything, he was hard on the older players, in the sense that he'd come down to sort of shake the club up a bit. He'd played for Yorkshire all these years. They used to winning hard cricket. And I think it was quite tough for some of the older players who'd been used to sort of, fairly relaxed Somerset way to suddenly have this man driving them forward and setting high standards and forcing the game forward and making declarations and giving the odd, bollocking here and there. So I think it was probably more difficult for the older players to adjust to him than the young ones who, well, if he did start, I mean, he gave Ian a few talking to. But the great thing was that if that happened, it was gone in 20 seconds. And there was no malice there. And, you were back to normal straight away. And it was probably, I remember the one time we always remember him having a word, let's say, with Ian was probably in that first season where Ian bowling, made a big drive, brilliant stop. The batsman in chaos, one of them stranded in the middle of the wicket. And Ian, being Ian, and 19 or 20, picked up the ball. The wicket was only about 4 or 5 yards away. He could have walked there. Yeah. But he hurled it at the stumps. Of course, he hit him. so the batsman's run out. But it was a foolish thing to do. He could have walked over and taken the bail off. And Closey laid down the law straight after that to say, what an idiot you've been. Of course, he was right. So it was fascinating to have Closey there, larger than life. He made us, well, unwittingly, he made us laugh, of course. There's so many stories about Closey, and nearly all of them are sort of true.
Yeah.
But it was also fascinating to sort of see how, well, Ian, he told me in later life, people thought I was just a complete buffoon. But he said, I did listen, actually. I did listen to him and to Tom Cartwright.
Tom Cartwright on the...
Because when Ian came back from Lord's, and they didn't think he could bowl at all at Lord's. They thought he was just a batsman, a barnstorming batsman. And he came back to Somerset, and he wanted to be an all-rounder, understandably. He wants to be involved all the time. And it was only at Somerset that they started to take his bowling seriously. And that first summer he played, he bowled military medium, little away swingers. Wicketkeeper very often, Derek Taylor was keeping wicket, very good standing up to seamers, but he would stand up most of the time, which is not the Botham we kind of remember. But they encouraged him. Cartwright, great technician, terrific coach. Ian listened to him, and then he listened to Closey as well. Although, if you were looking on, you didn't actually sense that he was doing much listening, but I think he did actually listen.
Yeah.
And he certainly claims that now, that they all thought I was a complete buffoon, but I did listen to what they had to say. And of course, within about 3 years, he was a fantastic bowler. It's an amazing transformation.
Yeah. What about you? You started as a batsman. How did your bowling get to where it got to?
Well, it got to where it got to because I was lucky enough to go to Oxford, and fantastic for someone like me, and Pete was at Cambridge. Yeah. Suddenly, in those days, you're playing against the county teams in April and May and June, for that matter. So you're playing first-class cricket, and it's fairly relaxed for them, but they're all playing. All the top players are playing. And I got into the Oxford side as a batsman, which made sense. I played for England schools and all that, along with Chris Tavray, who ended up at Somerset, but was then obviously at Kent. So I'm in the team as a batsman, and I'm not the most confident bloke, but I remember saying to the captain, well, after a couple of games, I think I could probably bowl just as well as our current spinner, and you could play an extra batsman or something like that. So I started to bowl, not with any great success, but I was getting overs in. Yeah. I think do you know who my first wicket was in first-class cricket? Dennis Breakwell. And I can't quite remember how I got him out, but I probably bowled previously, but then we played Somerset, Oxford against Somerset. So. And I think Dennis was my first victim. I'm sure he got a few by then, but and I think Hallam might have been my second. But I started to bowl quite regularly for Oxford as their spinner, and I think and then that happened in the following season as well. And in those days especially, counties, you could always find batsmen, it seemed, but bowlers were more valuable, all-rounders were more valuable. So they took note and saw I got a few runs at Oxford as well. So that helped advance me. And gradually, though, I always played in the top order at university. And actually, when I first played down at Somerset, I was still there. A few games I played in, say, 76, 77, 75, 67 maybe. I would have been probably in the top 6, because that's what I was supposed to be. But gradually, the balance slightly changed, and it was my bowling that kind of got me in the team, probably, unbelievably. Having sort of taught myself, or just through experience, with some, Tom was still here for a while, and Robbo was always around to help. But it was just getting that experience at university and bowling quite a few overs and getting a few people, not a whole host. No. That got me going and got me in, and more importantly, it got me in the team more quickly because they look, all-rounders help, don't they?
Yeah. In 75, you got your first team debut.
Yeah, well, I think I got a duck against Andy Roberts. So it's it's not bad. Caught behind off Andy Roberts.
He was quick, wasn't he?
Well, yeah, he was knocking on a bit then, but he was still quick enough, yeah. I don't have any great memories of that. Closely was playing, the captain. That was 75, but I only played a couple of games, I should think.
You played against the Aussies in the next game.
Oh, they always threw, they threw the young boys in. I don't remember much about that either. I do remember Dennis Lilly, I think, played. And I wasn't facing at the time, but I remember, I think Slokes was playing. And it was in those days, you'd get a terrific crowd against the Australians. And the Australians, to be fair, sort of lived out. And I just remember when we were, short boundaries here, and the sort of pavilion just below from where we're talking here. And there was a little gate you come through. And just to keep everyone amused, I think for Slokes, he decided he'd run actually through the gate in his run up, all the way up to the wicket. At some pace, no doubt, to bowl at Phil. So yeah, I had a sort of gentle baptism. I didn't play that regularly, certainly not in 75, a bit more in 76, a bit more in 77. And I didn't actually have a full season until 79 because I didn't leave university till 78. But it was a gradual progression, and increasingly I'm doing more bowling, and more or less constantly in the team. Touch wood, from about 78, 79 onwards. And
when you started, sort of white ball, well, it was red ball cricket, but one-day cricket was still really in its infancy, wasn't it? I mean, the Gillette Cup got going in 63, John Player League 69. We had the Benson and Hedges as well. So there were 3 one-day competitions. I mean, you were obviously quite a useful member of those teams.
Well, I became more useful. I mean, to start with, I played, I can't remember the years now, but there was one year where we came second where I played quite a lot, but very often I was batting at 7 or 8 and not doing that much bowling. But I was in the team. And then it wasn't till probably 78, 79, 80, the latter part, I became a fairly important part of the bowling setup. I was lucky in that, I would come on after Joel had bowled 4 overs, probably got a couple of people out, if not, it had terrified them. And they relaxed when I came on and bowled my little off spinners. But it took a while to, I suppose, learn that if you bowled in those days, it was such a simpler game in those days. If you bowled the right line to right-handers, you could have 6 men on the leg side. And glory be, it seems stupid now, but if you had bowled at middle and leg, they just kept hitting it on the leg side where all your men were, by and large. There's some exceptions. So I learned to be able to bowl a line. So in one-day cricket, we had quite a good formula that I would bowl to this packed sort of leg side field, and I was capable of getting that line. It's about middle and leg you're aiming for. And most of the batsmen just obediently hit it on the leg side. Not all, but most of them did. And not many tried to kill the bloke at long on, whereas nowadays they'd just say, well, that's an easy hit for me. So it was much simpler then. But so I evolved as a useful one-day bowler because I could get that. And sometimes the lack of pace, especially in the big games, the lack of pace could help because people are a bit more tight in, say, a Lord's final. It matters a bit more, so they're less inclined to take the big risk or to play so freely. So if you got it in the right spot, then they didn't like it so much because they had to make a decision whether to go for those big shots, which on a sort of random Sunday in the middle of the season, they wouldn't be too bothered about. So you could prey on their sort of anxieties a little bit in a Lord's final. And that worked out well 2 or 3 times as I got a bit more experience. They could agonise about the lack of pace and the big crowd and what if I miss it?
And of course, Closey left us in 77 and BCR stepped in to be captain. One Brian for another one. Chalk and cheese almost.
Well, amazing contrast, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Closey was just larger than life. It was time for him to go probably. He was 46 or something. And then in comes Brian, who obviously next, it just seems the automatic choice, doesn't it, Brian Rose? But at the time, it was not clear-cut at all, because Rosie used to be in his corner of the dressing room, not saying a lot. He was, kept himself to himself. He was just working on his batting, scoring enough runs to make sure he stayed in the team, and then scoring enough runs to actually get picked for England in 77. As quite a relatively dour batsman then. So it wasn't, and he didn't say much. He really didn't. He was really quite sort of self-contained. So it wasn't as automatic as we now sense that Brian should be captain. But he was obviously the right choice because he was tough. And he was really fiercely determined underneath that sort of quite quiet exterior. And he was transformed as a batsman then too. When he was captain, he suddenly started playing shots again. He was twice the player actually. But he wanted us to be, well, a bit more disciplined, a bit more ruthless actually, a bit less friendly almost. Right. You know, he wanted in Championship cricket to be, you know, pretty mean, not give them anything. And he also, Rosie, was brave enough to have quite a lot of faith in. Obviously, you got faith in the Richards and Botham, but also he didn't waste much time getting Pete Roebuck in the team. Stokes played quite a lot. I got in. So it soon evolved as his team, and some of the older ones moved on. He wasn't frightened enough to, you know, he was brave enough, if you like, to put his faith in the young ones and drop a few of the old ones now and again. And off we went.
And 78, we were there at Lord's against Sussex.
Yeah, and I was going to say we bottled it really, but we were outplayed. And we didn't play. Only Ian, actually. Even Viv didn't get runs in that match.
No, he didn't.
Ian was the only one who sort of played his natural game. Yeah. I think he got 80 odd. And I think as a group, we were kind of overawed, partly. But also, I think, sort of slightly carried away by the excitement. You know, it sort of overtook us. It kind of distracted us. Somerset back at Lord's and all this stuff. So we didn't play particularly well, and Sussex outplayed us, and we lost. And, it was such a disappointment. And then, of course, we came back here. I didn't. I played in the final at Lord's, but I didn't. I was 12th man for the Essex game, which was, an emotional roller coaster, as they say. Very tight game. Somerset back in second. I was doing the 12th man. It was so tense, and I remember I left the dressing room when we were batting. Nothing left for me to do. It was 12th man, and I think I was on the roof of the old indoor school, and I got this memory of Keith Jennings, no longer with us sadly, and I think Hallam. Uphill fight now. We're behind the 8 ball, but they're running everything and just missing out against Essex, just by 2 or 3 runs. What would have been our first ever trophy, having failed the day before. And then I always remember, and I've spoken about lots of times, the aftermath of that totally silent dressing room. No recriminations, but just silence. And then Jock McComb coming in and Roy Kerslake eventually coming in and said, look, you've got to go up into the viewing balcony. And everyone's just totally dejected. I said, we don't want to do that. No one wants to do that. No, you've got to go up there. You go, up we go. And this is about 40 minutes after the game's finished. And there's 7,000 or 6,000, 7,000 spectators still out there cheering. And we felt, it's weird, we felt terrible in a way because we let all these people down. We got so close. And we let them down. And then we came back down. And Viv smashed his bat, his lovely Stuart Surridge. He just smashed it against the old big bath into smithereens. So it had a huge impact, that game. I've said this to you before, I think, that I remember the scenes at the end of the 1978 far more vividly than anything happened thereafter. And I think it must have sort of left a mark with everyone there that the support was just astonishing. We felt dreadful that we let them all down, got so close, but let them all down. And I think it sort of helped galvanise us, the following year. We were ruthlessly determined to get something this year.
Incredible. I remember those days. I remember being down here for that game, that Essex game. And everybody, I've never seen anything like it. Everybody there on the pitch waiting, ready for you guys to come out. And of course we were in the old pavilion then, weren't we, as you say. We're actually probably
well,
sitting
in our
virtually where
dressing
we
room,
are.
I just pointed out, we couldn't see in the old dressing room, in the old pavilion, you couldn't see the ground at all.
No.
There was a little corridor.
Yeah.
If you were in the visitors' dressing room, there was just a little tiny slit window. You could just see what was happening. But in the home dressing room, you couldn't see anything, and therefore you had to go up these steps into that viewing balcony that always looked like it would fall over at any time. So, yeah.
And then 79, of course, perhaps didn't get off to the best of starts with our Worcestershire declaration.
Well, yeah. Where's Rosie? I mean, I can't. It was the second or third day. I can't remember. It rained, and
You had rain on the first day.
It rained on the first day, and they had at least 2 gays, probably not 3, but allocated for these matches. So we sat through the rain first day, second day. I think it was raining to start with. I don't know, but I'm sure it was a delayed start, and then we never quite established where the idea came from. But clearly, someone had worked out that naught for one, or naught for naught declared, 1 for naught declared, as it came to be.
Yep.
We cannot fail to qualify under the rules because of the various way they worked out run rates or something. And Roy was there. Roy Kersley was there, and there was a quick chat in the dressing room about what we could do. All I can really remember now, I wish I'd taken more notes, really. There was one man who said, "No, this isn't right. We definitely shouldn't do this," and that was Derek Taylor.
Derek Taylor, right.
But the wicketkeeper, who'd been around, came from Surrey. In some ways, full of common sense, and he was right. Of course, he was right. But we went out to bat, Rosie and Pete Denny.
Yeah.
And we still didn't quite know whether Rosie was going to walk off or not. So Viv had his pads on, number 3, ready to go. Rosie faced the first ball, stayed there. There was a no ball from whoever it was Van Berghold, I can't remember. And he played out the first over. So he'd still not sure, and then he walked off with Dasher. And then we had to go out and field for about, I don't know, I think Dredgie probably opened the bowling,
Yep.
and they got a run, and that was it really. And we all scarpered as quick as we possibly could, and it was a bad idea. I mean, we should have sussed it really, but they'd rung up Rosie had rung up Lords, rung up Donald Carr, who didn't tell us that you couldn't do it. I think he probably felt disapproval. Rosie said he sounded like he swallowed his pipe, actually.
Yeah, right.
So he didn't get a carte blanche. No, you can't do that, because it seemed to be within the regulations. Yeah. However, it understandably caused a bit of a stir. And then I think our next game was at Edgbaston, championship game. And it rained and it rained and it rained. So we're there, stuck away somewhere in Birmingham, mulling it all over, feeling like absolute pariahs. Rosie's not in a great state. And he's sort of thinking about giving up. And I do remember saying, no, don't do that. And it was only until about 10 days later, we had a John Player League game against Hampshire here. And we were all a bit, I think, nervous about what sort of reception we might get. Anyway, I can't remember which way round it was, but Rosie would have gone out to open the batting at some point with Dasher. And he got about 25, 30, was out, and got a standing ovation from the crowd. And we won the game.
Yeah.
And from that moment on, I think Rosie felt a bit more comfortable with life, and we all did actually. And off we went, and we played some pretty good cricket thereafter, in all formats actually. So we stuck together through what was clearly, even Rosie admits it was not a great idea after all, and it was a reflection actually of how desperate we'd never won anything.
Yeah.
We got so close the year before. It was a sort of reflection of how desperate we were to try and win.
Yes.
We'd have probably qualified anyway.
Anyway, yeah.
And there was a vote, wasn't there?
There was.
And I can't remember, there was 17 counties then probably. And
17.
it went 16-1. And the one wasn't Somerset, it was Derbyshire. I don't think our president, Colin Atkinson, was very pleased with what had happened. Roy was around, so Roy wasn't, he was in on it in a way. Anyway, for a while we thought that would stain our careers forever, but as it happened by September, although you still remember it though, because it still comes
remember
up.
It, absolutely right.
Well, you weren't there, were you?
No, I wasn't there, but I remember it happening and remember the repercussions and people saying what
we
it was
did
gonna
think
be.
it would stain us forever.
It was a big deal.
Yeah. It was a ballsy declaration in many ways.
But not illegal.
Not illegal. It did get the rule changed thereafter, or the law changed that you couldn't declare in. However, with the benefit of hindsight, probably not a good idea, but we all survived it.
And we survived it and went on and won.
Yeah.
Won 2 trophies.
Well, perhaps we'd have won 3 because they threw us out of the competition.
Absolutely. We had that wonderful weekend when...
Yeah, the mirror image.
Yeah, what can you remember of that?
Well, all the subsequent finals, and there would be 4 of them, wouldn't there?
Yep.
Joel was astonishing. He never won a Man of the Match award, ridiculously, but he was just fantastic. Viv never really failed. But the first one, Northants, I think it was more a feeling of relief than jubilation, actually, because we knew we'd mucked up the year before. We knew, Rosie knew, we all knew we had a good team, and especially with you've got Joel and Viv functioning, and not to mention Ian, we should be winning these things. But you still had to do it, and we knew we were good enough then. So the game itself, we won relatively easy, with Joel coming back and polishing him up ruthlessly at the end. Viv got 100. Viv had sort of reined himself in a bit, like great players sometimes do. He couldn't afford to fail. He knew that he was the key man, so it wasn't his most spectacular 100. Pretty good, but it was, it wasn't absolute mayhem.
No,
but he was going to get 100.
Yeah.
And that, as I say, it was more relief. And then, in any case, we had to get to Nottingham the next day to try and win the Sunday League. And we kind of knew we'd win that. It had gone so well. Well, we'd won at Lord's, and we needed a few other results to go our way, but we kind of just knew we would cruise past Nottinghamshire on the back of that win. There wasn't so much tension. And we won that game fairly easily, and the right results came back. And I've mentioned this many times to you. The abiding memory is Nottingham, Trent Bridge, the old pavilion there, the lovely flower baskets. Budgie played, and we came in. We'd won another trophy, second one in 24 hours. And dear old Budge got his boots off. Hung them up on the flower baskets and said, "That'll do, I."
Brilliant.
But we had happy days.
We had that purple patch then, though, didn't we? That team just seemed to gel, and you had that good a run of 5 trophies in 5 years. Quite phenomenal.
It was phenomenal, and yet now looking back, you think, well, I should think so, because as I said, you've got Viv Richards, best batsman in the world. Joel, probably the best one-day bowler in the world. Both, not too handy all-rounder. Plus, Rosie and the rest of us who could all play a bit. So we should have, there had been something wrong. In fact, if you'd been hypercritical, you'd think, well, what were you doing in the Championship? But we learnt to get used to Lord's too, because as I say, I think we were a bit overawed first time round by the surroundings and the occasion, and then increasingly we kind of were a bit blasé about it. I remember once or twice we turned up almost intentionally scruffy, you know, and there was a big sign saying, "Hey, you can't practice on the outfield unless you're wearing whites or something." But we all had our blue tracksuits on out there. And we got increasingly comfortable about being at Lord's and sort of enjoying the occasion, but still being sort of focused on it all in the knowledge that if we played properly, I think perhaps in the first game we were frightened of making too many mistakes as well. You know, that slightly defensive outlook. Well, if we don't take any risks, we might be all right. Doesn't really work like that. But thereafter, we were reasonably comfortable, even though, well, actually, we won most of the games quite easily. Probably the closest one was the last one against Kent, where we were, you know, defending a fairly small score.
Yeah.
But we were comfortable there.
And then obviously, you know, we had that run, and then I wanted to then maybe clip to 1985 when you batted with Viv when he scored his 322.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, what was that like? Because we talk about Viv, but I mean, just what is Viv like to bat with? What's he like?
Well, he was terrific to bat with. It made you feel very mortal or not very good sometimes, but that wasn't his fault. But the two things I remember now is that it's a partnership, and Viv did not bat in total. You felt he was engaged with you, he was behind you, he was supporting. What he didn't like, justifiably, and what could occasionally happen perhaps, is that his partner would completely opt out, think, "I'm batting with Richards, I don't have to try and do anything here, I just got to poke and prod." And he didn't like that, because it should be a proper partnership, even though he's obviously a superior player. So he didn't like people kind of just riding on his back and not doing anything. But I think I understood that. And so he was supportive, he was with you. He didn't say, you know, we didn't have long tactical discussions or anything like that. But he was supportive, and also he was awesome. You know? And thinking of that game, when
you were captain.
Yeah, I was, and Paul Bale got hit on the head, and the ball was zipping around a bit early on. And then Viv came and played like Viv, and he got to about 100. And Norman Gifford, I think, was captaining, or was certainly playing for Warwickshire, probably captain. And then he's a lovely man, Norman Gifford, but he decided to start mucking around Norman. He was bowling over the wicket, sort of into the rough, just out, almost. And you could tell Viv was getting a bit bored and thought he's got his 100 and I've almost had enough here. Challenge. I didn't like the challenge, you know. And he started he thought he was going to get out any minute. And then, fortunately, he must have hit Gifford for a few. He brought the seamers back. And it had been, you know, early on, had been doing quite a bit. And this sort of galvanised Viv again, that the challenge had returned. So he started playing, still aggressively, but playing, not so riskily. And then I guess once he got past 200 and there's still hours to go today, he thought, well, hang on a minute. And when we had quite a partnership, but I can't remember at what stage I went in. But all I'm thinking is towards the end, I mustn't run him out. But, I mean, he was a good runner anyway. He wouldn't let that happen. Yeah. But I remember thinking that was quite important. And it seemed almost inevitable he'd get there then. Once he set his mind, once he got into the sort of, significantly into the 200s, he thought, well, hang on a minute, I could get... I can't remember in those days whether there was a restriction on whether you batted for 100-odd overs or not, or whether... I know he declared just before the close.
Yeah, because, I mean, it was all in one day, wasn't it?
Yeah.
His innings was quite incredible.
Yeah, it was the first innings of the match.
Yeah.
And I would have been captain, but maybe we had to... I think we got 590 or something like that, and he got 322 of them. Yeah. Or something. We've seen the scoreboard, haven't we?
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, quite incredible.
I mean, it was a weird year in 1985 because there were a lot of runs scored, but there weren't many wins.
No, that's right. And I mean, and that was really the sort of lead up, I suppose, to the 1986 business, wasn't it, really? I mean, I mean, what was it like being part of the setup when that sort of thing was happening?
In 1986, well, it was
Yeah.
awful in 1986. At the end of 1986, I suppose, isn't it?
Because I'm guessing there was a fairly harmonious dressing room leading up, you know, when you were successful and all that sort of thing
Oh,
was
yeah,
going
yeah,
on.
yeah.
That by and large people...
yeah, it suddenly became an ugly dressing room to be in.
Yeah.
But you're right, and this is something I always point out, because I was mates with Pete Roebuck,
Yeah.
who becomes a key figure,
Yeah,
obviously, as
yeah.
captain. Mates with Both,
Yeah.
but that's remained the case. So I'm always stuck in the middle.
Yeah, yeah.
And one thing I always like to point out, you know, that they talk about the rivalry between Pete Roebuck and Both and subsequently Viv, I suppose. And I can promise you, from 74 to, well, practically 84, there was a lot of mutual respect. They got on well. Pete was, well, you couldn't help. Pete sort of thought the world of Viv when he first came across him, because not only as a batsman, but as a sort of Caribbean leader. And Pete and Both always got on perfectly well. They were very different, but they were intrigued by one another. And about 18 months before everything blew up, Pete had written a book with Both, or almost for Both. I can't remember what it's called now. But anyway, he'd written, you know, so for years there was plenty of mutual respect between the relevant parties. Yeah. And it then soured in the last 2 or 3 years, I guess. I mean, there was a dilemma for Pete. When he became captain, like quite a few captains, he wanted to be in complete control of the team. Well, you can't actually be. We can't. I'm not sure you can be in complete control of any county cricket team, but certainly not one containing Both.
No, exactly.
So that was always going to be a bit of a issue. And then there was the Martin Crowe, it's nothing to do with Martin, option.
Yeah.
Martin played for us in 84, made a really good impression, very good with the youngsters, scored stacks of runs. And then haphazardly, he got in touch with Somerset just to have his registration released, because Essex were very interested in signing him. And this, I think, triggered the mind of Michael Hill, who actually, Michael Hill was the man who put forward the option of, hang on a minute, Crowe might be the answer rather than the two West Indians, with Joel probably getting near the end of his sell-by date, blah, blah, blah. So the decision was made. I mean, I wouldn't have made it, but the decision was made, and all hell broke loose, and it was ugly. And they must have known that Ian was going to leave as well. That must have been part of their equation, because that was... and we took a while to recover from it all. And the relationship, but sadly, between Pete and Ian never recovered, probably between Pete and Viv. But Pete had... he'd been entrusted by Viv when he had his first child to find the name, find an appropriate sort of African-based name for it was Marley. I think.
Marley, yeah.
And Pete was the man who, you know, Viv had asked to sort of just do a little bit of research. So, you know, in a sense, Pete had named Viv's first son. Just to give you an indication, they were, I mean, they were, because they were in Taunton. Pete always was living in Taunton by then. Viv, I mean, Pete had spent probably more time with Viv, probably knew Viv better than I did, because I was married young and disappearing down to Devon by then, so I wasn't part of the Taunton set of whatever they got up to in Taunton. So anyway, it all ended in tears, and I mean, I was stuck in the middle at the end. It was ugly in '86. So best of times and worst of times, and it took a while to sort of for everyone to get over that.
Very difficult for everybody.
Yeah, but so for most of the time, it was fantastic to have these great players. I mean, I remember, I never think about it, I remember captaining the last game, because Viv was vice-captain in '86. But obviously, by the end of the season.
Yeah.
And then Pete was injured or something, or not available. And I remember captaining the last game against Derbyshire in probably the Sunday League with Viv, Joel and Bob. We won. But it wasn't a very joyous occasion.
Yeah.
And it was, looking back, it was a weird occasion, in the knowledge that this was going to be the last time we all that lot played together.
Yeah.
And we won a sort of mundane Sunday League game, and that was it.
Yeah, but we came around the other side, didn't we, and played again 87, and looking forward, you skippered, didn't you, in 89?
Well, Pete gave up in the sort of towards the middle or end of 88. I think. I mean, it was always a question whether Pete and I would succeed Both, I suppose. Pete was appointed, and I think he kind of gave up in 88, sort of mid to late season, partly because he knew that if he gave up then, I would be made captain, because I think he thought, well, perhaps he better have a go after all. I captained lots of times. Yeah. In the sort of mid 80s,
yes, you did.
Vice captain. I captained a few times before that.
Yeah.
But I think Pete thought that he wanted to give up, and he wanted to try and ensure that I succeeded him. So I captained end of 88, 89. And I would have done more, except for I got this job offer. And I thought, hang on a minute, I'm 34. My off breaks don't seem to be very successful anymore. And it's a nice job offer. And I'm terribly sorry, Peter Anderson, who I thought worked with for a year. Terribly sorry, Chris Tavray, who I invited to come along. Sorry, Berkey, who I enlisted as a very good coach. Yeah. But I'm going off now after the first season. But I don't really regret it. But
you had Jimmy Cook here, didn't you, that season, 89?
Yeah.
And what a magnificent player he was.
Yeah. I mean,
another big run scorer.
Well, a prodigious run scorer. I mean, he scored a lot in 89.
Yeah.
I mean, he was a gentleman Jim, they called him. Mm-hmm. He was sort of a model sort of team man in many ways. The odd thing we remember is that, you'd look at the fixture list and you'd see playing Hampshire, Malcolm Marshall, Surrey, Sylvester Clark, Gloucester, Courtney Walsh, goodness me. And Jimmy I just can't wait to play against these guys. I know, yeah. I want to be tested. And he's quite old, actually. He was late 30s when he came. Yeah. But he was really looking forward to playing against Malcolm Marshall and Courtney Walsh and Sylvester Clark, and the rest of us thinking, oh, God, here we go. But he scored a stash of runs. We didn't. We brought in Jimmy and Chris Tavray, who's my old mate from way back, to bolster the batting. We were still a bit short on bowling, but I left him to it then at the end of 89. Yeah,
and here you are now, Vic, still coming here, still being part of us, having sort of come back in the fold, and we never really said goodbye, but now you're back here, been involved with the live stream. I mean, how did that all come about?
Well, Ben asked me. And it's good fun. I mean, I've mentioned to a couple of people that I've done a fair bit of broadcasting.
Absolutely.
In between time.
Yeah, TMS and to mention but a few.
My broadcasting experience began with Brian Johnson, and it seems to be ending with Pete Trigo. So what more could a man ask for? but it's good fun. Ben does a great job. It gives me a nice excuse to get here. And I'm supposed to be on the board. Well, I am on the board here just to keep an eye on. But where better to watch it from than upstairs? Yeah. And I mean, and what a great, lovely sight to watch. There are mirror images, aren't there? In some senses, what the side we've got now and had for the last decade or more, always banging on the door, winning the odd thing, but not quite winning the championship. In some ways, what they've achieved is greater than what we achieved, in the sense that we did have three of the greatest players in the world in our team back in the early 80s, late 70s. Whereas the side from, Trescothick was captaining, and thereafter Abel, we've managed to be challenging for all those trophies, but without having a whole cast of world-class players. And the pattern has returned of, as in the 80s, of a basically local side made up with a few careful additions here, there and everywhere. Well, that's what we've got now, this homegrown, and that creates a real bond, I think, between us and the supporters. And there's always been that special bond, I think, down here. I don't know why, but there's always been that special bond between players and the supporters. So loyal and, almost uncritical, actually. I remember Andy Hayhurst, when he was captain down here, said, well, and he played at Lancashire. And he said, I can't understand it. We were coming near the bottom of the championship and not having a good season. He said, if I was at Manchester, I'd be getting abused left, right and centre. And here all I get is an arm round the shoulder saying, not so worry, we'll probably be all right next year. But it is great that at the moment, the bulk of this side that we're watching have come through our system with one or two nice additions, just as it was last year. And you've got to be able to do that now.
The Surrey team that we played, virtually everybody was local, weren't they? With one exception, I think, or was everybody local?
I can't remember, but it could well have been.
Yeah, from the academy, through the academy.
Yeah. So that's vitally important, and it's great that there's some good people working on that academy. We're lucky to have a good pathway, aided by a lot of those independent schools offering cricket scholarships and so forth. But nonetheless, a lot of hard work goes into keeping that stream of young players, and there's still a few to come who we haven't seen yet, I think. So that bodes well. And as I say, it's increasingly important for all sorts of reasons. One, it makes the supporters feel they belong more. But financially, it helps too if you can create your own players rather than have to go out and keep making big signings that cost boatloads.
And I guess we benefit because we're part of the whole Southwest Peninsula, aren't we?
Yeah. I mean, there's not quite so many distractions.
No.
And Somerset. I mean, you look at the Somerset side of the last. I mean, I'm an adopted Devonian. I'm actually from Somerset and in Devon. When at the golf club, it's Devon versus the rest of the world. I have to play for the rest of the world if I play at all, even though I've been living there for 45 years. But Devon, I mean, we've had half the side have come from Devon. We've got the odd, Goldsworth, Cornwall. So they're part of our family, and long may that continue.
And if you think back to all those years ago, the boy from Chinnock ain't done bad, really, has he?
I don't know. Well, I don't know, but I have been around. It's weird how the years. It's frightening how the years passed. I mean, I don't know when I first came down to this ground, but it would have been, early 60s.
So 60 years ago.
Yeah, and it would have been about 1961 when I would start. That was when I started being conscious of opening the paper and sort of. Well, it was big Graham Atkinson and Brian Rowe opening the batting from Devon, Brian Rowe. And Bill Alley, Bill Alley was getting 3,000 runs. That was my first summer that I was
61.
conscious of Somerset cricket or any cricket. And it was Atkinson, Rowe, Bill Alley, Peter White, Ken Palmer, probably Harold Stevenson was still playing. Sorry, but so it's a long association. I haven't written that.
Association.
And it's all in your book.
And still going strong, Vic. Great to see you. Thank you very much for your time.
Well, a pleasure.
Thank you.